Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Gamblecast. I'm your host, Richard Delaney, and today I am joined by Paul Krishnamurty, otherwise known as the Political Gambler, to discuss big bad Brexit and the betting options that this somewhat chaotic political comedy drama, I would call it, Paul, has afforded us. Paul is a professional gambler who dabbles in snooker, cricket and golf, but he's perhaps best known for his work in the area of political betting. You can read his back catalogue of analysis material on his site politicalgambler.com, and do keep an eye on Gambling.com, where he'll be providing more tipping pieces in the future. How are you keeping today, Paul?
I'm very well. How are you?
I'm not too bad. Are you all revved up for next Tuesday, or is that the wrong way to put it?
Is it even going to happen?
No.
I mean, one of the stories this morning says it might be cancelled. It's a 24/7 business, Brexit. It changes literally within the hour. So by the time we finish this, something will probably
absolutely
fully redundant.
So before we kind of go head first into the disorganisation and what's going on, could you explain, Paul, just for our listeners who mightn't have actually heard and aren't up to date in the situation, what exactly is Brexit?
Okay, so 2.5 years ago, the UK had a referendum to leave the European Union, which was the organisation we joined in 1973. And ever since, unfortunately, that referendum was on a straightforward in-out basis, and there was no detail really put forward as to how we would get out. So 2.5 years on, we're still working out how to do it. And as it stands, we are due to leave on the 29th of March of next year, and no deal is as yet in place, although this is all up for grabs.
So at the moment, Theresa May is the Prime Minister of the Conservative Party, and in recent weeks, anybody who's been keeping up to date with this would have seen there's a lot going on in the news with regard to the Conservatives and with Theresa May as well. Can you tell me what's going on there? Why is everyone up in arms?
Okay, I just want to give a bit of history because it's important context here. So when you go back, this started about 25 years ago when the Conservatives were previously in government. And basically they were torn apart over Europe and the development of the European Union, the Maastricht Treaty, the plans to develop the euro. And at that time, there were really broadly three positions in the Tory party. There were, let's get out now, the let's reform it, and there's enthusiastic Europeans. And that really destroyed them for a decade. Now, when they came back to power, David Cameron kind of successfully united people around a very vague promise that you will get a referendum when we're in power, right? They didn't have to have that referendum because they didn't win a majority and the Lib Dems blocked it. So basically, when the referendum came around, it was still on a very vague basis, and the party wasn't deeply split because they all agreed. The one thing they agreed about was there was going to be a referendum. Of course, once the vote takes place, they then have to come up with a template, a plan as to how we would leave Brexit, what our future relationship would be. And this is what they cannot agree with, and I don't think the country has any hope of agreeing with. And really, most disturbingly, is the fact that for the last 2 years, they've really been putting forward plans and ideas that are just not going to fly with the European Union. And suddenly the clock is ticking and there is no plan in place. And now they're fighting. Theresa May has come up with this withdrawal deal with the European Union, which very few people in the UK on either side of the argument think is acceptable. So that's what we're currently fighting over.
And so it sounds from what you're saying, Paul, like the election, the referendum in 2016, it was almost supposed to be kind of like a token, right? You know, it was we're giving you this, and nobody expects this to actually happen, but it's a token that we're going to give, and then it's almost like a kind of a small win, right? So the situation where we are now, 2.5 years later, it's not something that we would have been expected to be in, right?
No, not at all. No, I don't think nobody really ever, even during the referendum campaign, even during 25, 30 years of fighting, our political argument in the UK about whether we should be in the EU, nobody ever really discussed the details. I mean, I'm a real political nerd. I studied at university. I'm really into it, especially European stuff. And I have to be honest, until we'd left, no one had ever, to my knowledge, started a conversation with me about single market or customs union, let alone defined what they are. During the whole referendum, nobody mentioned Northern Ireland. I've still to this day not seen one example of the Irish border coming up in that referendum. People didn't realise these were going to be controversial.
So do you think that, was it more so a patriotic drive that kind of put that vote through, do you think?
Yeah, it certainly is patriotic. It's complicated. I back Leave because I've always thought that this country was pretty much 50-50, ready to and prepared to leave. I think that, as I say, historically we were 50-50, and then the thing that really tipped it over the edge was the Euro crisis and the refugee crisis, where at that point the Brexit forces, particularly in the media, found it very easy to put across that the EU was beyond redemption and it was finished and we were better off leaving a sinking ship, if you like.
Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about Theresa May. She's going to be the subject of a lot of our conversation, but tell me, what's the general consensus on how she's been performing in delivering Brexit? I think that there's probably an obvious answer here, but just for those who maybe aren't as up to date on the situation.
Okay, so I'd say it's actually quite mixed in that there is a general acceptance that the job's impossible. She's inherited that her rivals for the Conservative leadership, or people who didn't run, were quite happy to leave her to deal with this really unresolvable mess, and that's why there hasn't been a leadership change. And that she has been stoic in her pursuit of that. However, I think very few people could say she's managed it competently or well. Personally, I would go back to just after the referendum, where there probably was a window of opportunity to get some agreement with the Labour Party, where had they pursued a Norway kind of deal, I can see that might have been sold as the thing to unite a divided country, where both the 52 and the 48 get something out of it.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, rather than do that at all, she used it for political advantage to try and destroy the Labour Party, in that she called a snap election, which everybody thought they were going to wipe Labour out, and in doing so created these red lines about the customs union in the single market that really hadn't been thought through. And really everything's cut. The problems of the last 2 years have come from that, from trying to square the circles she positioned for a hard Brexit, a hardish Brexit. She doesn't have a majority in Parliament, and she doesn't have a practical way of achieving that.
Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about the betting options that are available on Theresa May at the moment. So I have a couple of options here, Paul, and I wanted to get your take on them. So exit dates listed by the bookies, they're in years. I've got 2019 is favourite odds on at the moment. That's at William Hill. 2018 is 5-2 at Betfair, and 2020 or later, I've got 11-4 at Unibet. So I want to talk that 2018 5-2. I have to say now, before this vote next Tuesday, if you were really thinking that May is going to go before 2018, certainly there's a bit of value there, right?
So Theresa May to go, yeah?
Yeah, to exit, yeah, exactly. So Theresa May to resign or be forced out as PM?
Well, I'm not convinced she will resign. I've been playing this in 3 monthly markets, and I've covered up till next March. And now I've closed out for profit because it really is uncertain. Problem with 2018 is, firstly, I don't think she will resign immediately if she loses the vote. Now, secondly, it depends on the rules. So what would probably happen is, even if she were to resign, or if she was to lose a no confidence vote, let's say around the 15th, 16th December, the process to replace her would probably take 2 to 3 weeks, and over Christmas and New Year, so you'd be into 2019 by the time she actually officially stepped down. That's why that is odds on. I personally think she'll go early 2019. But at those odds, I'd be more inclined to say 2020 or later, because it's incredibly complicated. And one of the problems that any rivals have, or opponents, is that if they call a confidence vote and she wins the confidence vote, she's safe for a year. They can't do it again for another year.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So, really, if you're betting on 2019, you are betting on her specifically losing a confidence vote or resigning. No one really thinks she'll resign.
And I mean, like, we may as well look at this now, but you can get longer odds there for 2022 or later for Theresa May to exit. But I mean, are these worth? I think we're looking at around 8-1. Are those worth ignoring for the time being, or?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you can't rule that out. But my instinct is where this will end up is that her position is totally unacceptable to the Conservative Party. Yeah. A second referendum or even extending Article 50, both for things that she has ruled out herself, they're both unacceptable to the membership. And I just find it, plus, I mean, the other point about 2022 and the longer things is the Conservative Party lost all faith in Theresa May at the last election. And I think there's a general belief among candidates and donors that they're not risking putting her through another election campaign again. So one way or another, they'll get rid of her. But they might well use her to complete Brexit and take the hit for that.
And I think that, it's like we were saying, is it's such a contentious issue, and it's so futile at the moment, and things are happening so fast, similar to the way that things are going on in say the US with Donald Trump and the Russia investigation, that it's really difficult to kind of predict things if you're looking further than a couple of weeks, really, right, at the moment. That's
I think this is much less predictable, even because this isn't. I mean, of course, it's a totally unprecedented situation for all parties, and there's one thing for us to assume certain laws and rules, such as Article 50 runs out on the 29th of March, and it has to be specifically revoked. But everything I know about the European Union says that they're masters in compromises and fudges and just dragging things out a few more months until we find some kind of vague agreement. And so that's really where we are at the moment. No one really knows what will happen in 2019. I think there's a general consensus now that, well, there won't be a hard Brexit at the end of March, and we'll just kick the can down the road a few months.
Yeah. So I want to move on and have a look. So this vote that's taken place on Tuesday, one of the markets that interests me the most is the next Conservative leader market. And I wanted to ask, do you think that the market's pretty open at the moment? I mean, you've got Dominic Raab, Michael Gove, and Sajid Javid. They're all 8-1, and then Boris Johnson is next after that 9-1. It's quite open. Should we expect to see the odds shift after Tuesday in that market?
I think they will only shift when there is an imminent. It becomes obvious that there's an imminent contest. The problem with this, now personally, I take the view that it has to be someone who voted for Brexit, and that really is a short list of 5, and I wouldn't fancy 2 of them at least. So the 5 would be Boris Johnson, that I don't think will be leader. I'm going to allow it. Michael Gove, who's very much the man to beat, I think. Dominic Raab, who I'm on at 33s, and I'm confident if it goes to the members, he would win.
Yeah.
Penny Mordaunt, she would be another one if she wants it, but I'm not sure she would want to run yet. And then the other one is this wild card of David Davis, who doesn't want it in the long term, but there was talk about him temporarily taking over to do Brexit. I don't really think that's a runner. So that's if it's a Brexiteer. The problem is, such is the uncertainty, there is another scenario where maybe Brexit drags on, or it's a really soft Brexit. May is leader for 2 to 3 more years. And the longer that she's leader, lots of other people could come into this.
Yeah.
Backbenchers who aren't in the cabinet now. I mean, like I say, Rab, I tipped Rab 33-1 a year ago because he wasn't in the cabinet. But it was like, this is a serious prospect in the Tory party and a pure Brexiteer. And look, within a few months, he was the Brexit secretary. So there are people on the backbenches who I'm sure theoretically she could promote. But I think it'll be one of those leading Brexiteers.
One of the things that's really fascinating to me here is the disparity in the odds for Jacob Rees-Mogg. So he's 20-1 at Bet365, but he actually goes as low as 9-1 elsewhere. And I mean, for those who don't know, there was that particularly icy and the only way I can describe it is very British confrontation in Parliament a couple of weeks ago. Tell me a bit about him, Paul. What's going on there?
So the story with Mogg is, I think if you just had a straight ballot of Conservative members, he'd probably win, right? However, the way the Tory leadership contest works is the MPs whittle the field down to their top 2, okay? So you might have 5 contenders and they will have round 1, eliminate someone until they get to, and they keep doing that until they get down to 2. And the MPs will not accept Jacob Rees-Mogg. He's got relatively very few allies. I think that's the same problem with Boris Johnson.
Yeah.
Those two, they're too toxic among MPs who think they're impossible to work with or too extreme, and therefore someone else will come forward.
I see. Okay. I want to chat a little bit about, so we saw, I think it was Wednesday, it was yesterday, I believe, or maybe the day before. So Theresa May accused of misleading Parliament inadvertently or otherwise, much of which is pertaining to that 6-page legal document from Geoffrey Cox's office. So the government was then found to be in contempt of Parliament, which is, as far as I'm aware, is the first time in history for not publishing it. And hashtag contempt of Parliament started to trend on Twitter. A lot of movement around that. Can you explain what's the significance of that legal document? What does it say? And was it a mistake for a May company not to release it?
Well, the document, rather like much of this wider May's and the Conservative Party's strategy on Brexit, it exposed that they are failing, but they haven't got a way of selling the truth to their members, to their supporters, to Brexit supporters. So, regarding the Irish backstop, we, just like all the trade deals, there's been one unicorn after another. We're just hearing all the time that, the backstop's temporary. We'll have a unilateral right to pull out of it.
Yeah.
And this is nonsense. By definition, it isn't temporary. That's why it's a backstop. It's there to ensure the permanent backstop. And there's no way we'd be able to unilaterally get it. And so the legal advice really demolished all of that. It demolished all those unicorns and all that fantasy. And obviously, when they chose originally that we'd be better off trying to black this through Parliament by misleading Brexiteers, if you like. And if you say it's a mistake, I don't think they really had another option in mind. They knew they couldn't sell that.
Yeah.
Theresa May's just been in crisis management mode with her own party for months.
Yeah. Okay. So on your end, you think that was very much just an intentional ploy, pretty much.
Really, yeah. It's an intentional ploy that was badly thought through. Yeah.
Cool. So I read a headline today in the Telegraph that said Jeremy Corbyn missed an open goal by failing to mention Brexit once during the Prime Minister's questions there yesterday. I'm interested to get your take in the midst of all this chaos with the Tories and with Theresa May and whatnot. What mandate is the Labour Party under right now? What's their number one objective over the coming weeks and months?
It's really interesting because, firstly, I'd say I totally disagree with what Telegraph said there and what much of the commentariat said, and explain why. So, let's be perfectly straightforward. The Labour Party are going to do what is best for the Labour Party, right, and their agenda. And their agenda with all of this from day one has been to bide their time, keep a low profile, don't get dragged into a ruinous position. So if we go back, Labour never wanted a referendum. It doesn't suit them at all to be even talking about identity politics and Brexit.
Yeah.
Right? And afterwards, as I was saying earlier, the Conservatives used this as a wedge issue to try and destroy the Labour Party, to try and present Labour as, they're the party that will block the referendum. So, some would say stupidly, but I think correctly, they voted for Article 50, right? Which nullified the Conservatives' main line of attack at the election. So ever since, they've been under pressure for what's Labour's position? What they've done, what Keir Starmer particularly has done, is they have kind of read the future by a month or two and stayed one step closer to Remain than the Tories all the time.
Yeah.
So the transition period was something Labour said would happen. It's now happening, right? All of their red lines were all based on promises the Conservatives or Brexiteers had made, and they knew they couldn't deliver. So it's quite kind of clever politics. And the big picture for Labour is that it doesn't matter as much to their voters, this issue. You take the last election, something like 2/3 of all Conservative voters said Brexit was the number one issue. When it came to Labour, it was less than 10%. Labour are driven by the issues you might expect of a left-wing party, anti-poverty, universal credit, the National Health Service, public services. And to them, this is all a distraction. This is all an unnecessary distraction. So what they want to do is survive all this, let the Conservatives take the hit, take the blame for a mess that they created, right? And when it's all over, when the public gets sick of it, which is pretty soon, I think, they will be in a good position to talk about the things they were always talking about, like universal credit and National Health Service.
Yeah.
And in particular, a big problem for Labour is that outside the big cities, where most of the seats are really safe Labour, pretty much all of their marginals are seats that voted to leave. And so, even if a majority of Labour voters in those seats voted Remain, it's a very, very tricky position for them. They don't want to be permanently alienate a majority of voters in, say, Halifax or many Yorkshire seats, for example.
So, in line with that, I'm interested to hear what you think of. So the next Prime Minister market, Jeremy Corbyn is the 4-1 favourite at Ladbrokes, Will Hill, Paddy Power, and Coral there. What do you think of that?
I don't like that because that has to happen. So for that to happen, it would mean that Theresa May leads the Conservatives into the next election, which I don't think she will.
Okay.
Somewhat, I think there'll be one before he gets a chance.
Cool. So the next question I wanted to ask you is, could there be another referendum? I've got a couple of bookies who have listed a second EU referendum to take place before 2019 market. No, currently priced up at 4-7. Yes, 5-4. Could there be another referendum? And, would we see a large shift in those markets after Tuesday's vote? Yeah, well,
that is moving as we speak. For two markets that are really moving as we speak, the exit date, which is now odds on to be after March 29th, whereas it was just a couple of weeks ago, 2-1 on. And the second referendum, which is now into 5-4. I tipped it at night before 2-1 about 2 or 3 weeks ago. I think it's got more to fall, because I think that although nobody, again, getting back to the Labour, what we were just discussing about Labour, this is an issue that nobody wants to say publicly what they really think.
Yeah.
Because it's suicidal. So the whole point of a second referendum is it's all very well for liberal or left candidates or even conservative candidates in strongly Remain areas full of university lecturers and professionals to say we're in favour of a people's vote. That makes sense. It'll work for them. It doesn't make sense for a vast majority of MPs to say that. However, I don't see where else we go. So I think that we'll go through a process in the next few weeks where May's vote loses. Parliament now has more or less control over what to do after that. You'll get other amendments put forward, such as a general election. Not going to happen. Yeah. You'll get this amendment about a Norway Plus deal, which I'm not convinced that's plausible, really. I'm not convinced the EU will reopen negotiations, but they'll try it, and that's a possibility. But if all those other amendments fail, which I think they will, they'll just reach a point in January or something where the clock's ticking and the second referendum makes perfect sense. It's the only way out of this. And I actually don't think it is quite... I actually think you can sell it. Eventually, you'll be able to sell it in a way that is not such an insult to democracy, if you like. So I would sell it as, first of all, forget this deal. Nobody wants this deal, so just forget this middle ground nonsense. The deal, it should be a straightforward question: remaining in the European Union or leaving specifically on a certain imminent date. Okay. And unlike 2016, you make it legally binding.
Yeah, that would make sense. Okay, so last question I have for you, Paul. Before next Tuesday, what's your final advice for those who are betting on Brexit this week?
So the two bets I like at the moment are, I think the second referendum will shorten up further. So that's a good bet. The other one, and I know it's been a bit of money for it already, there's 3-1 available. I think it was with Sky Bet, but certainly it's around generally, on Britain not leaving the EU before 2022. I quite like that, because if you're going to back a second referendum, that's the first part, obviously, of the double, unless they unilaterally revoke it. I think in a second referendum, Remain would be heavily odds on. I think it would almost certainly win.
Yeah.
So 3-1 could very quickly be odds on. If that second referendum is called, that 3-1 could suddenly be 3-1 on, 2-1 on.
Okay. Well, that's brilliant. Listen, Paul, thanks very much for coming on today and providing a bit of insight. I mean, it'll be fascinating to see how things turn out next Tuesday. And we look forward to having you on again soon.
Okay, yeah, pleasure. Nice talking to you.
Great. So that's all for today, guys. Thank you very, very much, as always, for tuning in. Follow us over on Twitter at gambling_com and let us know how you're enjoying the Brexit proceedings, but perhaps that's not the best way to put it. We'll be back next week with another edition of Gamblecast, but until then, we will say goodbye.